Hello everyone, and welcome to the DashCast, where we go about trying to find the most interesting people in the world of cryptocurrencies, finance, and business. On this episode of the DashCast, I was fortunate enough to have some time to sit down with Bill Ottman, the founder of Mindscom, an emerging social media platform that's aiming to challenge the way we think about user privacy and censorship on social media platforms. In this episode, I not only get to pick Bill's brain as to what he believes would be the ideal social media platform, but along with that as well, I get to learn about what he and the rest of the team at Minds has been able to do in order to challenge the narrative of overt censorship and overt breaching of user privacy on traditional social media platforms. Our sponsor for this episode is the Dash Report. For those of you out there who enjoy what I do by covering multiple markets and getting a macro perspective on all the opportunities available, I feel you'll really like the Dash Report. Again, it's a great way to support the channel, but it's also a great way to get a good, clean perspective on a variety of markets, from crypto to stocks to commodities and currency markets, which I usually don't cover on the channel. So if you guys are interested, there will be a discount code linked down below for $129 for an annual subscription. I highly recommend you give it a chance and would love to get your feedback on the newsletter. What's going on, everyone? My name is Nicholas Merton here at DataDash, and today I have Bill Ottman, who is the founder of Minds.com, a new competing social media platform that is aiming to take a decentralized approach and incentivization mechanism to encourage people to engage and communicate with one another. Bill, thanks for taking the time to come on to the DashCast. Really appreciate it.
Great to be here, man.
Awesome. Well, we had just talked a few days ago to kind of get a little bit of understanding about what you guys are doing over at Minds.com. But I guess just to start off and briefly kind of give a little bit of an intro as to what you're focused on, what you're passionate about. What are you guys doing over at Minds.com?
So we're an open source social networking platform. Got like 1.75 million users. And we're totally focused on transparency, crypto, decentralization, privacy. Obviously, we're sort of, we are probably mostly centralized in terms of our main infrastructure, but we're building decentralized services into it. And we're starting a whole decentralized wing called Nomad, which is a separate app, which has a fully peer-to-peer backend, but that's very much in its prototype phases. So, we basically want to provide similar platform to what people are used to with social media, but we do everything in the inverse. So, Google, Facebook are all surveillance based. There's no ability to opt out of this surveillance. The organic reach has plummeted, so you're not even reaching the people who subscribe to who subscribe to you, or the other way around. So it's just like the original social contract that we had with these companies has been betrayed. And so now there's this new league of alternative, more digital rights focused networks emerging. And we're one of them.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say with that, Bill, I can agree with you. I think the whole framework of how content platforms like YouTube operate, as well as social media, are completely broken because they've put absolute trust in algorithms. And it's almost kind of irritating in a sense as a user who can kind of pick up on it. I think they don't think we pick up on it as users, but I can tell you as a content creator, I go and watch my own subscription feed, and half the time I don't see videos popped up by people I'm subscribed to. And it's like, It completely kills the whole idea of a subscription model. And then not to mention as well, you've got much bigger issues, I think, outside of the convenience factor of these platforms, which is the surveillance that goes on, taking a slight bit of watch history and thinking that they're going to be able to provide good material to you. But in reality, they're really infringing on your own privacy and your own well-being in that case. So, I mean, there's all these issues that are ripe to be fixed in this case. And I'm really excited to see what you guys are doing over at Minds and kind of using that utility of crypto as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy that they felt like they could bring you in under this one context, subscribe to people, have people subscribe to you, and you reach them. And then, that to me is like the core purpose of social media and communication. So if that now, on YouTube, you notice the subscribe feed is no longer default. They sort of have this amalgamation feed that is stuff that you're subscribed to and stuff that you're not subscribed to, which is default. And the default experience is essential because most people are not going to waste their time going into something that isn't the default feed. So that is really unfortunate that that's happened, because everybody put so much time into building up these audiences, and then it's sort of stripped away from them. So this whole opt-in, opt-out by default model is really important. And, with Google and Facebook and others, there's no way to opt out of the program that they're sort of forcing you into. So,
Right.
you can change your quote unquote privacy settings on Facebook, but that's not really changing your privacy settings. You're not stopping Facebook's ability to follow you around, or see all your browsing history, or your location in the physical world. You can change basically the ability for other people to see your stuff in the community, but the most important thing is actually Facebook. They're the ones we don't want to have access.
Right. And the thing is, for example, in Europe, they had GDPR pass through not too long ago. And as much as I, on a moral sense, was like, this is awesome, being able to have some digital sovereignty in a sense, and being able to determine not only what Facebook can collect, but also what they can distribute to third parties. But the problem is that they made it was so barbaric in how they approached actually implementing it, where basically when you go onto a website now, it's like, oh, we collect cookies. Is that cool? Okay. And then basically from there on, there's no description or no easy bullet point description of what they're collecting in that case. So I think it came with good intentions, but in reality, it just fluked on itself in that case.
Yeah, that's what happens with a lot of tech legislation. It's just not fully thought out. There aren't enough technologists involved. I agree with you. I think GDPR had good intention, but it's also completely incompatible with blockchain, which is an important thing to understand. Privacy and blockchain. Blockchain can bring privacy in certain ways with its use of cryptography, but it's also immutable. Mm-hmm. So when you publish to a blockchain, you cannot delete it. And so if you're talking about the right to be forgotten and, really control over your content, decentralized and peer-to-peer systems are, to a degree, you have less control. I think that you can do permissioned access in interesting ways so that privacy can be enhanced. But, depending on the blockchain, that's going to completely be a different environment.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how GDPR evolves, because I don't think we've seen the final resolution of it, as long as it took to even just get GDPR passed. I bet there will be more resolutions to it or changes over time. But I'm curious, with what you guys are doing at Minds and everything, I'm curious, where are you guys at right now? Because the thing is, I've been a very early adopter of Steam, Gab. A lot of these platforms, I've been keeping up with them for quite some time, this kind of alternative social media platforms. Where are you guys at in the sense of users? What are you guys finding is kind of your strong suit? What markets are you really tapping into?
The most popular thing that we have really hit a nerve on is this whole gamification, incentivization for creators. So essentially, you earn tokens for your contributions when people upvote your content, comment, share, when you make referrals, even just for being active to a degree. We're rewarding tokens every day, like a daily airdrop. And one token will give you 1,000 impressions when you boost with it extra beyond your current audience. And this has been really just appreciated by people because of the algorithms that are restricting people's reach on other networks. Most people aren't really interested in paying for advertising. You can buy tokens, but we reward them more than we sell them. But people want to be heard, man. So when these networks are restricting people's ability to be heard, and then even though we're a fraction of the size, we're finding, medium-sized creators are finding it easier to build a following on Minds because you can actually reach people as opposed to reaching 5% of, your 1,000 fans on Facebook. Right. So the reward structure is really huge. I think that we're going to start to see more mainstream apps adopting more rewards and incentivization, likely tokenized. And so we're using Ethereum blockchain for that. It's an ERC20 token. And we have a hybrid on-chain, off-chain system so that, you don't have to pay gas for every transaction. That's what's allowing it to scale. But, we do try to incentivize on-chain usage just to get people familiar with MetaMask and some of these peer-to-peer tools. But I think that we just want to keep diving into that. That seems to be what is gaining traction. We want to monetize more aspects of the site so that creators can earn more. This is what people really are looking for. I mean, look at yourself. You're like a rapidly emerging creator. I imagine you're looking for more ways to be rewarded from the platforms that you're using, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, YouTube takes around 55% of ad revenue. It's so funny. I remember the longest time ago, because I want to make some points what you said, but one little thing to share is that some time ago, someone was like, they were mad because I started putting my own advertisements in my videos. Basically, I'd work with like a company that wanted to do an ad in the crypto space and give them a 15, 30-second slot. And they were like, aren't we paying you enough through our attention? I'm like, not really, not their YouTube system. Like they don't pay that much. It's a big misconception people have, but
true. And your ads that you make yourself aren't spying on your users.
Exactly.
Granted, maybe you do a little bit of both because, you have to now, but Google's and Facebook's ads are 100% based on surveillance. So, I think that it's totally understandable. Creators got to do what they got to do for now, but there's a lot of companies working on consent-based advertising that isn't reaching down everybody's throats by default.
Yeah. I mean, to go back on some of your points, Bill, just to kind of rehash what you were saying and really talk about the significance of it, I think the model is very exciting. So I recently got back into the Brave browser with the basic attention token, and I really like their model because it's like, look, if you do want to see ads, not only are they more privacy focused, but you'll earn BAT, which you can use to support content creators, things of that sort. I'm even more interested in the model that you guys have, because if you can basically remove the need for ads built into the platform and basically find a way to purchase the ability to reach more people or to reach more attention on the market, I think that you have an opportunity for a variety of demand to come in on that case and to actually build a very good equilibrium between supplying this token for usage on the platform and then also creating content on this platform that attracts users, and then being able to have a demand side a part of the equation where there's actually people, for example, during elections, people want to get their name out there and show their policies. There are businesses out there that are, for example, like myself, as someone who may not be buying advertising spots on the platform, maybe like a box ad on the site right side of the window, what I can actually do is feature maybe a new product or a new service that I'm offering through one of my posts. And it's more integrated in the platform. It's not as invasive as advertising or as annoying as it tends to be. So I think that that's a really interesting kind of model.
Yeah, another use case for the token that we've worked on. So there's two types of boost. One boost, you can just say, hey, I want to spend 5 tokens, get 5,000 views on this photo. And we, as Minds, will sort of distribute that throughout news feeds. But the other way is what we call an offer. And so I could send you an offer of like 100 tokens to share my post. So it's actually creating a peer-to-peer model for advertising so brands can and individuals can directly share to each other's audiences and be compensated for it. So you get an offer from me and you can accept it or reject it. But because there's a whole underground side economy that exists on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, where influencers and brands are basically doing these off-network deals, $10,000 for a post on Instagram or whatever, and they're going through all these contracts and not smart contracts, which would be much easier because that's so much overhead if you think about it for basically organizing just a simple promotional deal when all you really need is a notification queue of offers that your channel's getting. And hey, you like that product? You want, you think that fits with your brand? You can accept it. If these ones you don't like, you can reject them. And it's taken us out of the equation, which I want to do because realistically, sometimes who you want to reach better than any company could.
Right. I mean, that's a huge market. I was just actually watching, there's a channel I watch called VPro. It's like a Netherlands-based media company. And they did a recent documentary talking about Instagram and the amount of the amount of influencer market, individuals that are available in this kind of influencer marketing aspect of Instagram. I mean, people make entire careers off of it. Like for about 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't understand it. I was like, why are all these people spending all their time on Instagram? And I finally started to understand there's such an advertising market for it. And they kind of blend it in to everyday photos. They'll be holding a product or something like that. So, I mean, you could have the exact same thing on Minds. People prefer it because it's not too invasive. It's not too in your face. And it's not getting in the way of content that they usually see. So it's very exciting stuff. So, I mean, I think the model's really cool for Minds. I think you guys are really kind of pushing the envelope on incentivization, which I think is going to be the next leap here and where crypto actually can be really functional as a utility for a platform. But I'm very curious, Bill, in this case, because I think you kind of stand in the same light as I do, about the kind of trends of censorship that we've seen on social media, on traditional platforms. And I think it's led to a very interesting dichotomy in this case, or a really big bad situation, like a catch-22, I guess. You have basically these platforms which have kind of one viewpoint on the world, and they've been really censoring anything that they don't like on a certain platform. And it's led to platforms like Minds, like Gab, like Steemit, a lot of alternative platforms that are really big on free speech. And I think you have this split now where you have the bulk of social media in this kind of censored, controlled environment, and you have an isolated few in this case who have been kicked out or basically deplatformed in a sense. How do we either get more people on to that side, of the deplatform side in this case, more people being able to have free speech? Or do we have any kind of middle ground way where we can still communicate with these other individuals? Because it seems like it's splitting people down to two different sides, and that's not really I guess the objective at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation that you sort of have this group of networks that have free speech policies. You know, obviously we don't allow anything illegal, and there can't be incitements to violence or whatnot. But I would argue that the popular social networks are extremists. I mean, they have taken such radical stances on policy, on content policy and moderation, and totally inconsistent enforcement. I mean, one thing will be banned, another thing won't be banned, that are basically the same violation. Because once you start going down the rabbit hole of policing language, it gets, even with our policy, we still have a lot of overhead for enforcement. But when you have to be saying, oh, this medieval painting, because it depicts a nude image, okay, that's going to be banned, but like this medical image isn't going to be banned. I mean, you open up into a chaotic world of nuance where you just can't do it. And so then what they do is they bring in the machine learning and the AI, and they just sweep through it and ban things before a human even goes through it, just because they're saying, okay, well, cost benefit, we're willing to take some collateral damage to make sure that, this content doesn't stay up on the site, but that's obviously a dystopia. So, and not to mention, it doesn't seem that they're really even looking at the data that shows that censorship doesn't even work. Yeah. It just causes the communities to even further radicalize and go somewhere else. So clearly these big companies don't have regard for the internet itself as a community, because if they did, then they would be trying to say, okay, we noticed that there's this extreme content over here, but we also know, based on decades of data analysis and research,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. So what they should really be doing is keeping those people on and potentially targeting them with certain types of de-radicalization resources, or true discourse that would potentially help enable them to evolve their ideas. but they're not doing that, and that's really question. It makes me question what their actual intentions are.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No. I mean, there's a lot to tackle in there. To make a brief comment on your last remark, I think that's completely true. There's an issue, and it was really spawned by Facebook with the algorithm. It was one of the first major social medias to do this because Twitter, I don't know if it still works this way. It at least used to be that if I'm following someone, I'm going to get their post, and it's going to come in a chronological feed. But with Facebook, when they introduced the algorithm, that created the exact problem you're mentioning, which is that we're siloed. We get radicalized in our own bubbles. I mean, we saw that during the election. We saw that through a variety of periods over the past few years where people just are basically building up their digital profile to be popped into a certain little silo of information that's custom built for them. It's getting your own copy of the newspaper, whether it's real or not. That's a very scary thing. So I think that we need to work towards,
Sorry.
No, you're good.
No, but even without algorithms, that can still be a problem. I mean, even with a raw feed, if you're in your own little world, you could curate your own thing and you wouldn't have anything coming in outside your bubble. So we've been actually considering sort of an anti-suggestion widget, which in Boost already sort of acts as that, because every once in a while you're in your newsfeed, you'll see a boost, which is from outside your bubble. But even something a little bit more intentional where it's, you have your suggested content widget, which is just feeding you channels and content that it, thinks you're interested in based on who you're subscribed to and based on, the data that is just openly out there. But also something that would give you the inverse so that you're able to basically stay balanced. And, the things that come in that anti-suggestion feed will likely not be things that you necessarily like on whatever side of the spectrum you're on, but just as sort of as a balancing measure, it could be useful. I mean, it's just an idea that we've been considering.
I'll tell you, but I'll give my opinion, and this would definitely take up some of the supply of the tokens, but you should have the, the anti-recommendation feed, and every time you engage in conversation with an anti-recommendation feed post and have civil discourse, in that case, you should earn some Mind tokens.
Ooh, there you go.
I think that would be really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. A reward mechanism for engaging in that respectful discourse with the other side of the political spectrum. I mean, there you go. Yeah. And that's the engine of it, or the fuel that can help us on a long-term basis potentially prove even further that we can cause radical content to essentially neutralize with a free expression forum where people aren't getting banned, but also where there's proper incentivization to conduct respectful, open discourse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And going back to what you were talking about earlier, Bill, I think a good thing that summarizes what we've been kind of going through, at least in a real world use case, was obviously Twitter. I know there was obviously a while back, a lot of people watched the piece with Jack Dorsey. I can't remember her name right now. It's one of the major content managers over at Twitter. And they had Tim Pool on as well, who I've actually followed for the past few years. And, I found myself very neutral watching those episodes. It's very rare that I'll just take a full-on side, especially when you're on a podcast like Rogan's and stuff where you get to hear people actually have some decent conversation for once. But the thing is that I kept coming to is that as much as I understand, and I got this from the first interview that Rogan did with Jack Dorsey, was that it is a huge job. Like you said, there's a lot of overhead already with, for example, Minds and stuff with a few million users, and then when you get to Twitter scale, it's like how do you take care of all of that? But at the same time, like you said, there's inconsistency about moderation. There's there's very clear signs of shadow banning, of removing people for doing a certain activity and letting other people off the hook. In fact, multiple people, just when it happens to meet the narrative or the group of people that Twitter doesn't want to remove. So, I mean, I'm really interested in seeing how social media will be able to fix that over the long term and be able to kind of show a sense of transparency that that's not happening. Yeah,
it's actually really simple. I mean, all that any of these big networks would have to do is just open source their software. But, well, seriously, I mean,
smart move.
There's two issues. There's the transparency of the code itself, and then there's the transparency in their processes their moderation processes behind the scenes and the actual building out of their content policies. The main thing that Tim pointed out, which I think was just sort of an undeniable fact, that, and he said this point blank, that their policy is inherently polarized. Because, you know, when one part of the political spectrum thinks that they're stating a biological fact and the other part of the political spectrum thinks that something is hate speech, then you have a problem with the policy. And, you know, some people say it's offensive, other people don't think it's offensive. I'm not even taking a stance. It probably is offensive to some people and not offensive to other people. So, you know, that inconsistency, I don't see. I didn't see any evidence of Dorsey or the head of their moderation giving any really legitimate answer to that. At the end of the day, if the platforms are not free software that you can inspect, share, modify, redistribute, it's just not somewhere where I would personally give my long-term energy. So all of our code is open source, gitlab.com/minds.
I like the approach of keeping it open source and just being fully transparent, because I'll tell you this, it goes back to your point you made, Bill, about like going down the rabbit hole. When do you stop? Like, let's say, for example, I run for president tomorrow during an election, and people start not only spreading false things about me, they start saying terrible things that can emotionally hurt me, or can make me do something radical outside after I read those terrible comments about myself, right? And is it the responsibility of the social media platform to, like you said, try to like measure that collateral in that case of like, oh, when is it good to allow this to operate freely, and when do we need to put up the wall and the barrier of censorship? Like, I think if you go down that kind of rabbit hole of looking at like, oh, what do we do on the outside world in that case, unless it has to do with reporting false information, right? I think that's a little bit different. Like if you're allowing people to spread things falsely and you don't allow people to have a way to rebuttal that on a scalable way, then yeah, I can understand how that could be an issue. But I honestly, I just don't think we should have platforms of free discourse, because if we don't have them on social platforms, they're going to happen in reality. They're going to be on platforms that can't have any moderation or control over them.
Yeah, disinformation is another area that is very tricky, because it's like, some people have malicious intent and are legitimately trying to deceive. Other people are just wrong, and they have a belief that is crazy, but do they have the right to share a crazy belief? Well, I mean, I would say yes. You shouldn't be silenced from, having a certain religion or something, which, essentially a lot of this misinformation becomes. I mean, with the whole vaccine movement, I mean, anti-vaccine versus vaccine, everyone wants to make everything so black and white, but it's really not. I mean, obviously vaccines are essential and are a massive upgrade in the health of humanity, but at the same time, are there risks associated with that vaccines? Clearly, some.
It's interesting.
So,
I know it's a really controversial topic, but I actually was talking to someone who fit that can, what you were talking about. They were very middle down the road, and they were actually talking about the delivery times for vaccines, and that was their only concern. Like, they were completely in support of them, but they were worried about getting them delivered too early. And to me, I was like, oh, wow, I haven't heard that point of view. I've always heard they are bad, they're good. Like, I never heard a different kind of perspective that was a little bit more middle down the road. And again, I think that is a problem. It's like, again, we not only get siloed, but then people are believing in anything they want, in that case, just to prove one side.
Yeah, and I think that allowing posts to have references applied to them and have a debate with fact-checking occurring from all different sources is really important. But at the same time, appointing centralized fact-checkers, I don't know if that's really the solution either, because then you're just subject to the, bias of that particular organization.
Yeah.
So something more open where you can really let the metrics speak for themselves. And granted, metrics can be skewed. You could have a super popular BS idea, but over time, you would hope that as the discourse continues, that the metrics start to shift, and so you can start to see disagreement flare up. And, yeah, it really becomes a question of how deep into the rabbit hole of censorship do you want to go, whether it's offensive speech or misinformation. Obviously, if it's illegal, okay, defamation is a thing that exists. And, I think that certain types of misinformation may be illegal. But I think that we don't want to drift too far away from that line. I don't think that we can necessarily demand that is what we are debating now. We're going to be rolling out a jury system within the next month. We're actually going to be moving our moderation towards collaborating with the community so that the community can actually participate in the moderation site in these flash juries on different appeals and decisions on certain content, which we hope people will like, because I think one of the more dangerous things is when all the moderation is happening, behind closed doors. But when the community, obviously there's risks associated with, potentially herds ganging up and voting in a certain direction, which we have to watch out for. But at the same time, I mean, that's always been the worst part of the job for me personally, is basically having to make these extremely context-based decisions about certain content, and it's it doesn't feel like I should be the one, or we should be the one making those decisions. It seems like more of a legal issue, and so if more lawyers we can bring into the jury system, the more experts, and build up, users with certain expertise and sort of crowdsource that process, I think that's much more fair.
Yeah, I'm interested. Have you guys explored models, for example? I know you guys have the Minds token. Is there any model that you thought of that basically is almost like a proof of stake model or delegated proof of stake model, where I could either vote with my own token supply, let's say I have 1,000 Mind tokens, I can have some form of voting power and authority, or you can almost have a governance model as well of a few hundred representatives that I could vote with my token in that case. I've seen some networks do that. I mean, EOS, for example, does it with their block producers. There's 21 major authoritators on the network who not only reach consensus on what happened, but also will help vote on future governance policies. Have you guys thought about doing something like that for Minds?
We've definitely been considering different types of staking mechanisms, but in terms of having the ability to vote, I don't think that we necessarily want, only people with financial resources be in a position to vote on certain things. That was one of the big rifts where we sort of differ from Steam, is that, in Steam, the more Steam you hold, the more voting power you have, which I can understand that as an experiment, but I don't think that it's really fair or fosters the type of behavior that we really are going for. I think that if, potentially, I want to figure out a way to have people stake and offer the resources of their machines in order to help earn and help build the network. Because anyone can actually launch their own node of Minds. You can take our software and launch your own network.
Interesting.
Now, so potentially having some sort of staking integrated with that, based on maybe how active your network is, to help build the network, I think that could be really interesting. But in terms of jury systems and the ability to vote, or having more voice based on the money, I think that your decision-making power in a voting context should more increase only if you've sort of proven yourself
as an active participant in the community. You have not just financial, but also a vested stake in it. I mean, the one thing I would see is there'd have to be a really good earnings mechanism for users, in my opinion. It would have to be that as I've been more and more of an active user, I'd have some more say, or in that case, I'd have ways to earn tokens. Therefore, I have some kind of financial incentive in it. And I've decided to hold my Minds tokens in that case.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you can sort of prove yourself over a long period of time as being active and contributing to the community in a positive way, then absolutely, I think there should be a way to basically earn more.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I have to say I love the platform so far, and I'm going to hit you with a little bit of it might seem like a curveball question, but if you can't list off three, it's no big deal. I just want to know what are like the three biggest things that you guys are adding to Minds, because like I said, I had it some time to look through the platform. It is really interesting. I love the layout of it, and you know, it's very familiar feeling in a sense with traditional platforms. But I want to know, what are you guys doing that you might see are like next big things that no other platform has done, or some new features that are just coming to the platform in general?
I do think the jury system is very important from sort of a digital democracy point of view. So that's coming. A whole new analytics suite is coming for users and on the network level. Been working really hard on that with Elasticsearch and Kibana, and we just hired a chief data scientist and bringing in Etherscan so that everyone can sort of better understand the token economy. We are working a lot on more incentives, more rewards, more monetization features, multi-currency support in Wire. So Wire is the peer-to-peer tool, so I can tip you with tokens or subscribe to you on a monthly basis in tokens in exchange for different rewards that you set. So that's coming. Our whole roadmap is actually up on GitLab, but I'll just run through it. Multi-language support has been something we've been putting off. That's definitely going to be happening this year. That's probably been playing a big role in us not hitting like orders of magnitude of growth, but just some of the frameworks are being a little bit slow with their localization features that we're using. But that's a lot of overhead too, but we need to get there. Scheduling, a post scheduler is coming, which tons of people have been asking for, just to sort of diminish the amount of admin time. Definitely going to be working on live streaming. We added video chat into our groups recently with Jitsi, which is an open source encrypted video chat service. So that's going to evolve into live streaming. So that is somewhere we definitely want to go. There's so much, man. I mean, Nomad, which is the fully peer-to-peer app, is really important to us because, you know, we don't want to stay too stuck in sort of the central server paradigm. It is necessary. It's just a fact of life that right now, to be able to provide these kinds of services, you know, the peer-to-peer fully decentralized world is just not there yet. And we need to, you know, be providing service to people and getting people off of these surveillance platforms. And, you know, having a fully free and open source alternative, we consider just urgent.
What I see what you're doing, Bill, I think, is you're realizing, you know, where we're at right now, and you're taking the best things we have right now. We have open source transparency. We have the ability to use cryptocurrencies as monetary incentive mechanisms. And you can also still do all this in a scalable nature through the centralized components that you have. And that's honestly, I think it's kind of idealistic in this sense to think that we're going to be in a fully decentralized world. If anyone understands like networks of scale, it tends to be that things get quite centralized over time. That's why, like for crypto networks like Bitcoin, even though they do need to scale to much more transactions if they want to be used as money on chain, you know, that's something that's, you know, like for monetary transactions, which aren't as frequent, but for a social network, I mean, like, for example, I think there was some crazy statistic, like on Facebook, there's 2 million likes or reactions to posts like every second or something. It's something beyond like fathomable in that case. So if you're trying to collect all of that as transactions in a blockchain, I mean, you're going to need to scale to billions of transactions per second. And that's just for Facebook, you know? Yeah,
blockchains are not going to be able to power major social networks. They can help with certain functions, certain components of the site. Other distributed frameworks, torrent-based stuff is going to make it a lot easier, a lot more scalable. So yeah, we're being balanced with it, and anyone who really knows anything about scaling tech would say the same thing. If you see things that say that you have like a fully decentralized social network on the blockchain, then, you know, first of all, I guarantee you that they don't even have a product. It's probably just a landing page trying to,
But they need 50 million. But they need 50 million in order to do it. Come on, Bill. Don't be so negative.
I know, man. No, I mean, hey, look, more power to you. But our whole ethos has been have a product first. We didn't even launch our token until we had 1 million users.
That's
and
awesome.
On day one, as soon as we launched the token, you could use the token on day one. So it's all about delivering. Don't talk, just build stuff and release it before you even talk about anything. The last thing that we're going to be focusing on big is Messenger. Our Messenger needs a major upgrade, and so that's all coming. We're fortunate to be able to be growing right now. We have super brilliant developers all over the world. We got our team is 15 people now, and it's happening. So stay tuned, man. And I'm really excited to finally meet you, and hopefully we'll get you to launch your Minds channel soon.
Absolutely, yeah. I like I said, I've been exploring with a lot more privacy and I guess censorship resistant focused technologies outside of just crypto as money. And it seems like things have improved steadily since I last checked on them back really about a year and a half ago. So I'll not only be getting set up on Minds, Bill, I hope we get to see each other sometime soon in the near future and get to learn more about what you guys are doing and get to meet some more of the developer community around the project. It's cool to see something open source like this fostering. So. But anyways, outside of that, if you have any questions, guys, feel free to leave them down below. I'll try to get to them as well. And Bill, if you or some of the Minds community would like to answer anything as well, feel free to. And we'll add any kind of links or important things in the description down below. But Bill, thanks for taking the time, man. It was really awesome to have you on. Thanks
for having me. Yeah, find me minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. And that wasn't too bad of a curveball.
That's good.
You got more. I'm here, so I'm happy to come back on anytime.
Yeah, we'll put the GitLab link. I think that's always good when projects have that stuff open sourced as well. So outside of that, thank you again, Bill, for coming on, man. And we'll hope to keep up with what's going on over at Minds, and hopefully you guys will take down the oligarchy of central media.
We won't do it alone. Thanks a lot.
And that's going to be it for this episode of the DashCast. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. And if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up down below, share it with a family or friend member, and consider leaving a comment down below as to who you'd like to see on the next episode. You guys know I always appreciate getting your feedback. I want to go ahead and give a real quick shout out back again to Bill for coming on to the DashCast. It was not only great to actually get to meet Bill, as I've been following Minds and a variety of alternative social media platforms for some time, but it's really cool to see the success that Minds has had in passing over 1 million, I think it was 1,750,000 users. It's incredible. And I really hope to see these numbers grow. It brings a little bit of optimism to me from seeing all the negativity and the dark path that social media has gone down nowadays. But I hope Minds is able to be that platform. And interestingly enough, it's done in an open source and relatively decentralized manner. So to me, that's the future. Our sponsor for this episode is the Dash Report. For those of you out there who enjoy what I do by covering multiple markets and getting a macro perspective on all the opportunities available, I feel you'll really like the Dash Report. Again, it's a great way to support the channel, but it's also a great way to get a good, clean perspective on a variety of markets, from crypto to stocks to commodities and currency markets, which I usually don't cover on the channel. So if you guys are interested, there will be a discount code linked down below for $129 for an annual subscription. I highly recommend you give it a chance and would love to get your feedback on the newsletter.